Alright, hello guys, how's it going? In today's video, we're taking a look here at the current conditions. We're going to be diving into tons of tropical activity and also a massive Arctic blast which is currently taking place. We can actually see it on screen currently where that cold front is. It's pretty easy to see that there's a giant trough pouring in, bringing Arctic air mass with it right behind this air mass here. We could see, I'm actually going to turn on the temperatures here, and what we see is the areas out ahead of this cold front. It's going crazy right there, but we see 60s, 70s primarily over here, and we can see behind this Arctic blast where it's really taking place, we see 40s and 50s taking place. It's crazy how many comments I see from you guys daily. Oh, there is no Arctic blast, it's not happening. I don't know who these people are. I don't know where they're coming from. And I know they're definitely not watching the entire video because if they knew my definition of an Arctic blast, they wouldn't be saying that. There is an Arctic blast, and it's already taking place. Like, let me tell you, if you're in Bismarck, North Dakota, you're not saying there's not an Arctic blast because it's currently 36 degrees outside. It's people from, you know, where it's currently 80 that are saying this. But it will affect everybody here in the eastern United States. All of these 70s... in here, a lot of these are a lot higher than the actual high temperatures are going to be tomorrow. A lot of these areas will be in the 60s and very, very low 70s as the highest temperatures tomorrow. It's actually going to be 90s for a lot of folks today, but once that cold front comes through, we're going to see a significant change in the pattern, obviously. Now, let's zoom into some different regions real quickly. There is some storminess here taking place for the Rockies, and we can actually see it kind of moving along this area just like this, where there seems to be a bit of a low in this area. We could see some rotation happening in there. This is leading towards some spotty storminess for that area. The Four Corner States, just like things have been for quite a while now, we're seeing some isolated and scattered storminess around there. We can see that around the very, very back end of this cold front, we do have more persistent storminess, larger areas of precipitation here. Is what I would say. Nebraska, South Dakota, Kansas, Missouri, all of these areas are seeing quite a bit of storminess. And then up here for the Great Lakes, if it was a bit colder, this would be lake effect snowfall, but oftentimes when very, very Arctic air moves over these Great Lakes, we see this type of precipitation, which is lake effect precipitation. It's just in the form of rainfall because we're so early in the season. But if this type of a scenario was happening almost just any later, it would be a major lake effect snowfall event. In this case, we're seeing lake effect rain, a lot of it too, as this Arctic air moves over the warm lakes. It's amazing how far out. I think we've been talking about this Arctic blast for over a week now, this particular one, and it is coming in with a bang. I think it's the understatement of the year, I would say, in the weather. It really just has been very potent, and unlike any Arctic blast we've seen this early on in the year, in years past, this has been a lacking thing, and this is a very old-fashioned fall-time Arctic blast. Now, we do have a lot of storminess along the eastern United States, the interior especially, as this cold front violently goes, you know, from record heat out ahead of it to Arctic blast right behind it. Here in Virginia, I know our forecast is about 95 today. The forecast is 69 tomorrow. Imagine that jump. 95 down to 69 degrees in 24 hours. That is going to be extreme as this cold front rolls through. And I'm sure those of you looking at your forecast are seeing some sort of similar jump, about 20 degrees or more in that jump. Now, we can see that for the entire United States, this is really the main thing going on, is this big old cold front here bringing that Arctic blast. Now what we're going to do is we're going to move on, and we're going to focus on the upcoming pattern, where we'll talk about the upcoming storminess, the tropics, of course, where there's so much going on, including a potential major hurricane impacting the Gulf of Mexico and potentially the Gulf Coast and potentially the East Coast. So there's a whole lot to talk about. Alright, now here we are taking a look at the upcoming storminess. Let's just move it towards this afternoon. As you can see, we're going to see more and more of this storminess building here for the eastern United States, especially the Northeast, as, again, that Arctic blast violently meets with really, really warm temperatures. it's just going to lead towards a lot of different impacts for that region. We could also see a lot of storminess along the Rockies, including some snowfall and some rainfall. Now for Friday, September 23rd here, tomorrow, we can see that there is going to be not a whole lot left over after that cold front rolls through, because that is leading towards most of the interesting weather we're currently seeing. So once that moves out, it's going to be a lot less interesting. We do see the beginning of what's going to be our next cold front. We see that kind of build in around Monday, Tuesday time frame. Not quite as violent as you can see, but it does lead towards an even stronger Arctic blast. Watch this cold air mass blast into the eastern United States. Potent Arctic blast, really. This next one, look at the blue lines here indicating very, very cold temperatures reaching far southward. Even some snowfall very close to the United States here in the Gulf of Mexico. We're seeing that lake effect precipitation again, which is indicative of an Arctic blast moving overhead. Again, my definition of an Arctic blast being an air mass heading in from these Arctic regions and just blasting into the eastern United States, which is exactly what we see in both cases. First off, our first Arctic blast, which happens, it's already kind of happened, so you can hardly see it, but we can already see that this dip has occurred here in the Arctic air mass. So we're seeing it being able to pour down into the eastern United States. And as we look towards that next one here, we can see that this one does the same exact thing. We see the Arctic Circle here breaks up, and it forces this cold air to head elsewhere, which is usually considered to be a negative Arctic oscillation. And what we see is an Arctic blast dive down into the eastern United States. Again, look at the kink here in the Arctic Circle, where it's just allowed to really just pour down into the eastern United States. Classic, classic, classic. Now, let's focus in on this tropical system, because we still have a landfalling, potentially major hurricane here on our European model for the third day in a row. Obviously, the closer and closer we get with it still showing this, the more likely it is to happen. And then it becomes a bit of a either superstorm, which would be a combination of a nor'easter and a hurricane, some sort of mix there, or just a pure nor'easter here for the eastern United States. Now, this is if it's over land. If it headed like this and then got back over water and then re-entered, we could see it really regain intensity and its tropical dynamics and then re-hit the eastern United States, which would be much, much worse. For now, this is what the European model shows. The GFS model isn't as, too far off, really. We still have that Gulf of Mexico potential major hurricane, but we can see that I'll draw the line where the European model took it, actually kind of like this. And then it rides it up inland through the east coast just onshore. But we see the GFS actually just keeps it going towards the west. It stalls out a lot, which is exactly what we don't want to see. That stalling that we see there is what would allow for this storm to continue to intensify. Very, very intense storm potentially. And then it hits Louisiana as a major hurricane and heads inland. Very interesting scenario there. We haven't seen as many scenarios pop up like this, and this is the outlier at this point, but we see it do something like this, which is kind of starting to give us a cone here. Anything between the GFS model and the European model seems fairly reasonable at this point, which again would be anything in between there. We could see it head further east in the European model as well. We could see it not develop like these models are showing. There's so much still on the table. Now, the European model, obviously, when we take a look here at the total precipitation with its scenario, we would just have monstrous amounts of precipitation up and down the East Coast because of that tropical system. If you're anywhere in the whites, we're expecting practically no precipitation. Your grays will be 1/10 of an inch or less of precipitation. Your greens will be 1/10 of an inch to 1/2 an inch. Your blues will be 1/2 an inch to an inch. Your yellows will be 1 inch to 2 inches. Your reds will be 2 to 5 inches. And your browns will be 5 to 10 inches. As we take a look at Florida and Georgia here, we have to mention that the browns will be 5 to 10 inches. Your blues, here we see some blues within the grays. I'll actually switch our views here. Let's see if I can get us more of a southeast view. Oh, switch to model run. Here we go. Let's just move this back. There we go. So you see these blues within the grays there, the grayish browns. Those blues are going to indicate 10 to 15 inches of precipitation. We also see the magentas in there for Florida and Georgia. Unfortunately, that would indicate 15 to 20 inches of precipitation or more. This particular model, if we look at the very, very bottom right, says the maximum here somewhere is 20.45 inches. 20 inches is a lot from one storm system, so we're going to have to really watch this closely. That is a concerning look, to say the least. Let's take a look at that total snowfall, and it is increasing ever so slightly every single model run here, and it will probably continue to do so all the way through January, where it'll probably peak out sometime in January or February. But for now, we see the grays over the Rockies primarily, not really much elsewhere really at all. We see the grays will be about a dusting, if anything. We have a lot of blues for some of those mountaintops. That's going to be 2 to 6 inches of snowfall. Even some purple specks in there. That's going to be 6 to 10 inches of snowfall. And for now, that's all we have as far as snowfall. Now for the temperature pattern, let's see these Arctic blasts. Let's see what the impacts will look like. First off, tomorrow in the morning is going to be the peak of this first Arctic blast, where the greens in here are going to be anywhere from 10 to 15 degrees below normal, which is a significant departure from normal, surely bringing the coldest air of the season by far. We even have some of these blues within the greens here popping up, and these are going to be about 15 to 25 degrees below normal. Just insane temperatures here, really bringing October or November-like temperatures a month early, probably late October temperatures. Very, very interesting stuff. As we take a look towards Saturday, we do have some of these cold temperatures still around. It's just not quite as widespread. Still some greens, especially along the eastern seaboard here, which would be, again, 10 to 15 degrees below normal. By the time we reach Sunday, we do still have some cooler air in here, but primarily warmth throughout the entire country. By Monday, we have our second Arctic blast trying to move in here. We see some of those greens again. And then by Monday, or by Tuesday, better yet, we see this really working its way into the eastern United States as a whole here. Your blues will be anywhere from 1 to 10 degrees below normal. Your greens are going to be 10 to 15 degrees below normal, which we see that widespread once again. Now Wednesday, look at that, even more potent. The greens here, again, 10 to 15 degrees below normal. These purplish blues within the greens, that's going to be 15 to 25 degrees below normal. We see that last through Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. Hardly. We see mostly colder temperatures out west, which is a negative PNA, which usually is going to force warmer air up into the central and the eastern United States. But we do have this tropical system here bringing some dynamic cooling with it. As we continue on to the long range, we see primarily colder in the west and warmer in the east. Usually this goes back and forth, and we're going to have this cold period from about now, the 22nd, all the way through the end of September. And then it seems like the beginning of October will feature this warm in the east, cold in the west feature. We'll have to see how long that lasts. All right, now let's go ahead and take a look at the 5-day graphical tropical weather outlook. Here we are taking a look at it, and it's obviously very, very busy. We have plenty going on here, including Hurricane Fiona, which is going to impact Canada in a very major way, unfortunately, as a potentially historic hurricane for them here in coastal Canada. We have Tropical Storm Gaston up there in the very northern North Atlantic. We have our first area just now moving into our main development region. The main development region is going to be this area here just offshore of Africa. This one has a 60% chance of development over the next 48 hours and a 60% chance of development over the next 5 days as well. So a very moderate to high chance of development. We see this area in between has a 20% chance of development over the next 48 hours and a 30% chance of development over the next 5 days. Definitely a little bit less chance on this one. And then our main area of concern, this is the one that we're expecting to move into the Gulf and potentially impact the United States in a very, very major way. And by the way, I have a bad feeling about this one. I'm just going to put this out there. I have a really bad feeling about this one. The only storm this reminds me of, I remember feeling this way with Hurricane Michael years ago. So just going to leave that there. Chance of development over the next 48 hours is 70% chance. our chance of formation through the next 5 days, though, is 90% chance maxed out value there of development over the next 5 days. So this one has by far the highest potential, and it's heading towards the Gulf of Mexico for the most part. The only chance this one has of really not developing and really not becoming a very strong hurricane, in my opinion, is if it goes much further south than anticipated and stays near the Yucatan Peninsula and very, very close to the Mexico coast here in the very far southern Gulf of Mexico. If it sticks around there, I think what could occur is suppression. I think it could stay weaker, and it could have a very hard time developing. But if it has any northern curvature here and starts barreling towards the United States, I expect rapid development. Rapid development. The worst case scenario is if it moves into the Gulf, slows down like we see on the GFS model, and it hits, somewhere here in our western Gulf of Mexico. That's going to be really bad if that was to occur. But also, if we see it slow down, hit Florida, and head off the southeast coast, we could see it become a major hurricane before even hitting Florida in that case scenario, and then regaining that major hurricane status offshore of the southeast, potentially impacting even more states along the way. That East Coast scraper type tropical system is one of the most impactful hurricane paths possible, or tropical system paths in general. Either way, I have a really bad feeling about this one. I think it has a very decent shot to be a very impactful storm. And we're going to watch it daily. We're going to watch it closely. Be sure to tune in with us daily, as we will be checking all of these things, not only the tropics, but the Arctic blasts, the upcoming temperature patterns, because again, it looks warmer in the long range, and upcoming storms in general. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe if you did enjoy it. Be sure to like the video and leave a comment down below with your thoughts. I'll see you guys in the next video.